I had taught myself one thing over 9 years of practice. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. That is what I believed. That is what I had built my life around, the particular discipline of not speaking until the moment required it, of holding everything just long enough for it to lose its urgency, of keeping the silence so long that people stopped expecting anything else from it. But that night, standing in the dark of my own penthouse with the phone pressed against my ear, I had to face something small and inconvenient. I was not silent because of control. I was silent because I was afraid. The city was below me, 40 floors of glass and steel, and the thin hum of traffic moving through midnight. I had lived above it long enough that it no longer impressed me. Tonight, I was not looking at it. I was standing with my back to it and the phone to my ear, and Emma's voice was on the other end of the line, and I had not yet decided what to do with any of it. I had not decided. I was still deciding. I kept the phone pressed against my ear. I did not hang up. That is the thing I came back to later. Not what Emma said, not what I decided after, just that I did not hang up. For 9 years, that would not have been noteworthy. For 9 years, hanging up had been my easiest reflex. Not rudely, I was never rude about it. I had always found the courteous end of a sentence, the natural pause where a goodbye fit cleanly, and I had used it without effort. Every time. That night, I did not find it. I stood in the dark and I held the phone, and I let the silence stretch between us, and I did not reach for the ending. That was the first time in 9 years I had not hung up. Emma talked. I listened. She was not nervous. That was the first thing I noticed. She had thought about this call before she made it. Every sentence she placed arrived deliberately. I did not cut in. I did not offer her an exit or redirect her somewhere easier for both of us. I let her speak. I let one sentence finish before the next one started, and I held the phone, and I did not look for the gap. The city behind the glass did not change. The hum continued. I was not looking at any of it. I was looking at the far wall of my own apartment, at nothing, and I let Emma's voice come through, and I held it. That was new. For 9 years, I had not done that with anyone. I had a plan for how this call would end. I would be polite. I am always polite. It costs nothing and reveals nothing, which is the ideal combination. I would find the right moment to insert a thank you and a goodbye. I would put the phone down. I would go to bed. In the morning, this would be something I had managed cleanly. I was wrong about every part of that. Emma told me she had not been at the check-in table by accident. That was the first thing she said. Not what she had seen, not why she was calling. She began there. I noticed her before you did. She had been watching Clara from across the room for several minutes before I arrived at that table. She knew who Clara was before the name came up. She had positioned herself there on purpose. I processed this without speaking. I let each word Emma said travel the distance from my ear to somewhere inside me where I had not yet decided whether to accept it. I let the words arrive and waited to see what I would do with them. I was still deciding. I kept the phone pressed against my ear, and I held myself at a careful distance from all of it, the way you hold a hand over a flame to gauge the temperature before committing. She described what she had seen. 3 things, one at a time. The first was a mark on Clara's inner wrist. Not one mark, several, close together in the same location, layered the way skin looks when it has grown accustomed to a needle, when the tissue has stopped resisting and simply accepts it. The skin around those marks is different, Emma said, quieter. She described the exact placement. She used clinical language. She did not soften it. The second was the way Clara held her spine, upright, controlled, not the posture of someone confident in a crowded room, something else, the posture of a body that has been instructed to maintain a position, that has learned over time and repetition what happens if it doesn't. There is a difference between standing tall and being held tall. Emma knew the difference. She named it. The third was the way Clara checked her watch, not the way anyone checks the time at a long event. She was counting, measuring the gap between where she stood and somewhere she was required to be next, a calculation, not a habit. The watch went up, and the expression shifted, and it went back down, and none of it lasted more than 2 seconds. But Emma had been watching. She had been watching for a reason. Emma said each of these things slowly, in order. She talked the way someone talks who has waited a long time to say something to the right person and is now saying it with care. I did not cut her off. "Did you think I wouldn't recognize the signs, Julian? I'm a doctor. I've seen enough to know what I'm looking at. The woman at that table tonight, she is fighting something serious, more serious than whatever you've been telling yourself." 1 second. 2. I stood in the dark of my apartment, and I let the sentence arrive, and I did not deny it. This was unusual. I deny things efficiently. It is a skill, not dishonesty exactly, but precision, the ability to locate the specific point where a thing does not apply to me, and to name that point clearly. I have done it for years. I am practiced at it. That sentence I could not find the point for. I let it sit in me instead. Something in it refused to pass through cleanly. Water moves through rock, but the rock is never completely dry after.
"Do you remember I met her once?" Emma said. "My 3rd year of medical school. She did something I have never forgotten." I remembered. I did not say so. There is a difference between remembering a thing and speaking it aloud. Speaking it makes it present, pulls it out of the place where you keep things you have decided not to live in anymore. I had spent 9 years choosing not to make certain things present. That was not going to change at midnight in my living room with the lights off. Emma left the sentence open. She did not fill it. She said it, and then she waited, the way you leave a door slightly ajar when you're not sure the other person is ready to come through. I was not ready. I stood on my side of that door, and I did not move toward it. But I could hear the air coming through the gap. That part I could not control. "Give me Cooper's number," Emma said. "I'll tell him what I saw. What you do with it is up to you." I noticed then that she had used Cooper's name. Not "your investigator," not someone who looks into things. Cooper's name, specifically, as if she had been briefed. I turned toward the room where Daniel had been sitting most of the evening. He was still there. He was looking at the window, or making the shape of looking at the window. What I could tell was this: he was aware that I was looking at him. He was completely aware, and he did not turn around. He stayed with his face toward the glass, and he did not turn, and he knew I was watching him, and he did not move. A man who refuses to turn around when someone is watching him carries a particular kind of information in his stillness. I was on the receiving end of this conversation, not the end that holds the information, not the end that sets the pace, the receiving end, the end that waits for what it is given. I cannot tell you when I last stood in that position. I have spent years arranging things so that I do not. In a meeting, I control the agenda. In a negotiation, I control the room. In the interactions that have mattered to me over the last decade, I have been the one who decides when and what and how much. Emma was deciding all 3 of those things tonight. I opened my contacts. I found Cooper's number. I sent it to her phone. One small action. I have signed larger decisions in less time without pausing. This one I paused on, half a second before I pressed send. I noticed the pause. I left it unexplained. I put the phone down after we said goodbye. I stayed at the window for a moment. Something I had believed for a long time came to me, slightly rearranged. I had always thought of control as holding on, as keeping the shape of things intact, as not allowing the outcome to slip. That night, I thought, sometimes control is the willingness to release the outcome entirely. I was not sure I believed that yet, but I thought it. I sent one message to Cooper. Tomorrow morning, my office, 7 o'clock. I put the phone face down on the table. The city was still lit below me. It has no opinion about what happens in the buildings above it. It never does. Daniel came in from the other room. He did not ask anything. He sat in the chair across from me, not close, not far, and he just sat. He does this when he has calculated that there is nothing useful he can add. After a while, I said, "Thank you for getting Emma involved." "You don't need to thank me," he said. We sat in the silence after that. Not the kind of silence that accumulates pressure, the kind that two people share when they have known each other long enough that neither one needs the other to explain. I did not know where I was heading, but for the first time in 9 years, I was heading somewhere instead of standing still, whatever that was worth. The next morning, I was at my office by 6:30. My usual time is 7. I had told Cooper 7. There was no reason to arrive at 6:30. The coffee was on my desk when Cooper and Daniel walked in at exactly 7. It was still full. I had not touched it. I had been sitting at my desk for 30 minutes before anyone arrived, with a full cup of coffee going cold on my right and my hands on the desk and nothing on the screen that I was actually reading. I do not know why I came early. I noticed I had come early. I did not examine it further. Cooper was not what I expected. I had not asked Cooper much about him. Daniel's endorsement means something, but Daniel has different criteria than I do. I had formed a picture in the gap between the information I had and the person I expected. Cooper was older than that picture, smaller. His jacket was pressed with care, but dated at the lapels, the jacket of someone who doesn't buy new things when old things still work. He came in and sat down across from me without looking around my office the way most people look around my office for the first time. He did not register the view. He did not register the space. He looked at me. That was all he did at first. He sat down and he looked at me in the particular way of someone who has been watching for a while and is confirming something they already suspected. I did not like it. I also did not look away. I spoke first before he could set the rhythm. I need to know where she is, what she's doing day to day, and anything connected to her health, not to intervene, to know. Cooper uncapped a pen. Name? Clara Morrison. He wrote it without reacting, no raised eyebrow, no question about the relationship or the circumstances or how long it had been. Just the name in the notebook, and then the pen resting on the page in case there was more to give. I said, not to intervene. I said it twice. I was not certain in that moment which of us I was clarifying it for. Cooper set the pen down. Mr. Hayes, I've been doing this for 20 years. In that time, I have located a lot of people for a lot of clients. And in my experience, those clients fall into 2 categories. The first kind wants to know so they can leave things alone. They want the information and they want to close the file. The second kind wants to know because they intend to act on it. He paused. Which kind are you? The first, I said. He looked at me for 3 or 4 seconds, measured, even. Then he gave a small nod. It was not the nod of agreement. It was the nod of someone who has recorded an answer and made no promise about what he thinks of it. He saw this before. He knew the difference between what people say in that seat and what they do when the information arrives. So did I. Emma arrived a few minutes after 8. She was not the same person who had called me at midnight. The woman who had called at midnight had been something beneath the precision, something audible if you were listening for it. This morning, there was only the precision. She sat down across from Cooper and she told him what she saw at the gala. Each of the 3 things,
The marks, the posture, and the watch laid out one by one with the particular weight that medical training gives language when someone uses it correctly. She placed a handwritten note on the table in front of him when she finished. I was at my desk on the far side of the room. My laptop was open. I was making the shape of working. I heard every word she said. I heard the space between the words, too.
I did not look up. Emma was still talking when she mentioned something in passing. A detail, small. She offered it almost as background, a piece of context inside a longer sentence. I looked down at my hand. I do not know what prompted it. There was nothing to see there. My hand on the desk, unchanged, exactly as it had been. I looked at it for 2 or 3 seconds, and then I placed it flat on the surface and looked back at the screen. Daniel was in the room. He was quiet. In my peripheral vision, I could see he had noticed. He said nothing. I did not explain it. There was nothing to explain. I have had the same laptop for 4 years. There was no reasonable justification for this. I have replaced things that needed replacing far sooner. Phones, equipment, anything with visible wear. The laptop works. That is the answer I give when Daniel raises it, which he has stopped doing. At the corner of the hinge, there was a scratch. Shallow, uneven, the kind that happens once and stays. My hand has learned where it is. When I work for long stretches, I sometimes find my thumb resting against it, not searching for it, just arriving there, as if the hand mapped the geography before I did. I touched it now. 1 second, maybe less. Then I was typing again. I have not thought much about that scratch. I have thought about it enough to notice that I do not. Those are 2 different things. Cooper closed his notebook. That's enough to start. Emma stood. She looked at me from across the room. I met her eyes. We did not say anything. She gave one small nod, precise, and walked toward the door. She passed Daniel on her way out. She did not look at him. I noticed. I could not have explained why I noticed, or what the noticing meant, only that it was the kind of small detail that settles into you and stays. There was nothing in their history I was aware of, but she walked past him without a glance, and he watched her go, and neither one said anything, and the silence between them had a shape. I filed it. I said nothing. Cooper straightened his jacket. End of next week, Mr. Hayes. I needed before that. He looked at me. I know, he said. 2 words, no elaboration. He walked out. I had hired this man. I was paying for his time and his results. He had just told me his schedule was his to keep, my timeline something he was aware of but not bound by, and he had done it without a word of apology or any of the usual softening people use when they want something to land gently. He simply left. I watched the door close behind him. Daniel and I were alone. Are you okay? He said. Don't ask me that. He absorbed this. He did not try again with a different version of the same question, the way some people do. He accepted the closed door and sat with it. That is the hard skill. Most people cannot hold the silence after a door closes on them. They need to fill it. Daniel has always been able to sit in the space after and let the other person keep whatever room they have asked for. I do not say that to him. I have never needed to. I went back to the screen. 20 emails, a meeting in 90 minutes, an investment decision that needed a signature before noon, finite things, problems with answers that existed somewhere and could be reached with the right information and the right process. I am good at that. I have always been good at that. I put my attention on the screen and I kept it there. The laptop was open, the scratch was at the corner of the hinge, exactly where it always was. I did not look at it. The 10 o'clock meeting ran 40 minutes. Long table, 14 people behind a presentation, me at the head. The numbers were strong, and I said so. The exposure in one sector was higher than the model showed, and I said that too. 3 decisions, 40 minutes. 2 of them required information I had not had before I walked in. This is the version of me that the world sees. Not a performance. It is real. It is genuinely how I think, but it is not the whole of what is there. I have spent long enough building it that wearing it takes nothing from me. No one in that room had access to the rest of it. That was the arrangement. It had held for a long time. Toward the end of the meeting, someone mentioned a hospital network in Boston, a development opportunity, a real estate angle on a healthcare campus. The city came up once, briefly, as the slide changed. I stopped.
Half a second, my eyes stayed on the presenter. Nothing in my face moved. I found the thread of the conversation in less time than anyone in that room would have clocked. Daniel was in the corner with his tablet. He attends these meetings not to contribute, but to understand the direction of my thinking. He saw the half second. I watched him see it in my peripheral vision, and then I looked back at the presenter and continued. No one else saw. No one else had any reason to look. Sophia called after the meeting. I stepped into the hallway and I answered. I listened. I said what made sense to say. I was, as I always am, polite and careful about it. The call ended at a natural place and I ended it there. The entire duration I was not present. That is not a new problem. I have not been present in that particular way since a long time before Sophia, before the person before Sophia, since a specific point in my life where presence of that kind became something I could no longer find without understanding why. I have learned to manage the absence. I perform presence well enough that most people cannot locate the gap. Daniel watched me end the call. I offered no explanation. There was nothing to explain. I left the building after lunch. No security, mask, glasses, the usual arrangement. Daniel has stopped questioning it. Early in our working relationship, he worried about what happened to me in a crowd without a team. Now he understands that I think clearly when I walk, and that I cannot do that with 4 people managing the perimeter around me. Midtown Manhattan in winter has the advantage of cold. Most people are moving with their heads down, focused on getting somewhere warmer. No one slows to look at me. I am a man in a good coat and nothing else. I walked west. Bryant Park. The rink was running. Families at the edges, children in bright coats, the sound of blades on ice carrying through the cold from somewhere beyond the tree line. I found a bench near the back corner of the park, away from the main path. I sat. I opened my laptop. I looked at the screen. After 4 minutes, I had not read a single line. The words were there, arranged correctly, present on the page, waiting. I was not processing any of them. I had been staring at them and taking in nothing, the words sliding past whatever is usually behind my eyes and landing nowhere. I closed the laptop halfway and left it. There is a thing about this park in winter that I have never explained to anyone. I come here when I cannot think in the office and cannot think in the apartment. Something about the cold and the noise of the rink, the particular sound of children who are not thinking about anything except moving, makes it easier to sit with something I cannot solve. I was not solving anything today. I was just sitting. The coffee I had left at the office was cold by now. The decision I had to sign before noon had been signed at 11:50. The meeting was done. The emails were handled. I had no reason to be here except that I could not be anywhere else. I noticed the boy because he was not moving. Everything else in the park was in motion. People skating, children running the perimeter of the rink, a vendor closing a cart near the entrance. He was sitting by himself on a bench, about 20 feet from mine, head down, very still. He had a small figure in his hands, an action figure. One arm had broken off at the joint, and he was sitting with the body in one hand and the detached arm in the other, working patiently at fitting the two back together. Not crying, not looking toward the gate or toward any of the benches where parents sat watching other children. He was handling it, by himself, quietly, without looking up for help. 3 older kids had been near him earlier. They were gone now, off somewhere else, already finished thinking about him. They had not been cruel about it, not deliberately. They had simply moved on, the way children move on, which is sometimes the same thing as cruelty, and sometimes not. The boy had not watched them go. He had looked at the figure in his hands when the arm came off, and then he had sat down and he had started working. I did not intend to keep watching. I watched. I put my laptop on the bench beside me. I was not aware of doing it. There is a kind of stillness in a person that is not the same as peace. It is the stillness of someone who has stopped expecting the situation to change and has begun working with what is. I have been that kind of still many times in my life. I recognize it the way you recognize a language you learned young. There was a Naruto sticker on the shoulder of his jacket, an old one. The edges had begun to peel and curl at one corner where the adhesive had given up. He had not replaced it or pulled it the rest of the way off. It sat there, half committed, in the exact condition of something that has been used so long it has simply become part of the object, no longer a decoration, just a fact of the jacket. He was not looking at the sticker. He was not looking at anything except the problem in his hands. He did not call out to anyone. He did not look toward the adults at the edge of the rink or toward the other benches where parents sat watching. He was inside the problem, the broken arm, the figure, the question of how to make the two parts into one again. And he was working on it with the focused, unhurried patience of someone who has learned that help is not guaranteed to arrive. That is what I had done for most of my childhood. When something broke, I fixed it myself, or I lived with it broken, and I did not look for someone to come and do it for me, because I had understood early, very early, in the way children understand things before they have language for them, that the looking was a waste of the time you needed for the fixing. I held that thought for a moment. Then I stood. I walked over. I sat down on his bench without saying anything first. I picked up the broken arm from where it had fallen on the wood beside him. I turned it over in my hand, the socket, the break, the small plastic joint that had failed along a seam. I had no particular plan. I had gotten up from my own bench and walked 20 feet across a park without a plan. That is not something I typically do. I noticed I was doing it and I did not have an explanation ready, and I sat there anyway. The boy raised his head. He looked at me with the specific, careful attention of a child who has learned to extend trust slowly. Not frightened, just measuring, taking the necessary time before committing. I turned the arm over in my hand. "Naruto?" I said. He considered me for a moment, then a small nod. "Which episode's your favorite?" He thought about it seriously, the kind of seriousness children bring to questions they have considered before and want to answer correctly. "The one where Naruto meets Nagato. You know that one?" "I do," I said. I pressed the arm back into the socket. It required a particular angle, not obvious. The plastic gave and then held. Not perfect, slightly off from where it had been before, but it would hold. I handed it back. He took it. He turned it once in his hands, examining the repaired arm from a few different angles. He was not polite about it. He looked at it carefully and made a real assessment.
Then he looked up at me. He was deciding whether the repair met his standard. It was a fair and serious question. I waited. "You don't have a dad either, do you?" Not quite a question, more like something he had worked out and was now confirming. "Why do you say that?" I said. "Because you were sitting over there by yourself," he said, "and you have the same look I have when I sit by myself." I looked at him, not at the bench or the figure or the park, at him. A moment passed. I am not sure how long. Long enough that someone watching from the other benches would have clocked it as unusual. I sat with a 9-year-old on a park bench in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon, and I had no answer prepared, and for once I did not reach for one. And then I laughed. Not the version I use in rooms, not managed, not calibrated, not designed to land correctly. Something real, from somewhere I had not visited in a long time. I laughed and I did not stop it. There was no one here it would cost me anything with. There was nothing to protect. He watched me, patient and completely unbothered, as if he had suspected this was the right reaction all along and had simply been waiting for me to arrive at it. When I stopped, we sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable. He was looking at the figure and I was looking at the bench, and the cold was moving through the park, and the rink made its noise in the distance. None of it required anything from either of us. "What's your name?" I nearly asked.
I did not ask. I do not know why. Some instinct about not turning a moment into something it hadn't been, not making it a story, not adding anything it didn't already have. I let it be what it was. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Daniel. I looked back at the boy. "Take better care of that next time," I said. He gave a small, unceremonious nod. He was already looking at the figure in his hands. One arm now sat at a slight angle at the joint, off by a few degrees, permanent. He turned the figure once, assessing it, and seemed satisfied with what he had. Not disappointed, satisfied. The figure worked. It was enough. I stood. I walked away. I looked back once. He had not watched me go. He was sitting with the figure in his hands, content with what he had. The imperfect repair, the arm that did not quite sit right, the thing that worked now, even if it would never be exactly what it had been. I kept walking. I did not ask his name. It did not occur to me until I was halfway across the park. What stayed was the question, the direct, uncomplicated way he had asked it, not performing observation, not reaching for effect, not trying to say something wise, just saying the thing he had noticed. He had looked at me across a park bench for 30 seconds and named something, and the thing he named was not wrong. I walked back through the cold thinking about that, about what it means when a child sees something in you in half a minute that no one who has known you for years has bothered to say. What I did not know then was that I would see that boy again, and when I did, nothing about the second time would be what I expected. Cooper was late. I had been at my desk since 6. Daniel had come and gone. The apartment was quiet. When Cooper arrived at 7:45 without a message and without an apology, I did not ask. He had been somewhere. He had moved on something, and the moving had taken longer than expected. That was in the set of his jaw when he came through the door. He sat down and placed a folder on the table. He did not open with pleasantries. He pushed one page across the table. Clara Morrison, last confirmed address, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 2 hours from here by car. I looked at the page. The address was printed cleanly, a street name, a number, a city. She had not been in New York, not across an ocean, not in a different country, not somewhere you would need a considerable effort to find your way to. 2 hours. She had been 2 hours from where I sat for some portion of the 9 years I had spent in this city, and I had not known. I had chosen not to look, and so I had not looked, and she had been 2 hours away. I held the address in my hands, and I did not say anything. "She wasn't there," Cooper said. I looked up.
He had gone to the address that morning, early. He had spoken with a neighbor, someone who had lived on that street long enough to know the patterns. Clara had not been at the apartment for approximately 3 weeks. The neighbor was not alarmed. They expected her back. They did not know exactly when. "You went this morning," I said. "Early," he said. I had not sent him there. I had told him to begin. He had made a decision about what beginning looked like and had driven to Philadelphia before I was out of my first meeting of the day. The address was real. The apartment was real. She had lived there, and 3 weeks ago she had stopped being there. The neighbor noted something. A van, medical transport, regular schedule. It came and picked her up. He turned over the next page. Brigham and Women's Hospital, Boston. Daniel started to say something. "Brigham and Women's is—" "I don't need that explained," I said. Daniel stopped. Silence. A long one. Cooper sat across from me with his folder open, and he did not fill the silence. He had the patience of someone who has learned that some information requires a moment before anyone can speak again, and that the moment is not something you can shorten. I sat with the name. I did not move. I did not look at Daniel or at Cooper's folder or at the window or at anything in the room. I sat and I held the name, and I let it be the thing it was. Brigham and Women's. I have never been to that hospital. I've read enough. Years before any of this, in the way information accumulates when you read without a specific purpose, I had stored certain things, hospitals, their specialties, what each one is known for, what kinds of patients go through which doors and do not come back out the same way. That hospital. I had been allowing myself to approach the end of that thought for a week. Emma's description of the marks on the wrist, the way Clara held her spine, the way she checked her watch at a gala like she was counting down to somewhere she could not be late. A van with a logo, a regular schedule. Now the thought was finished. I sat with the completed version of it, and I did not speak. The room had nothing to add. After a while, I said, "Go on." Cooper continued. There was more. A younger woman living 2 houses down from Clara's address, a child living with her. The neighbors said they were family, Clara's sister and the sister's son. Sister, child. I noted it the way I note additional context during a briefing. Filed it, available, not yet acted on. Name? I said. Anna Morrison. All right, go on. A person's younger sister having a child was ordinary. There was nothing in it that required further attention. I filed it under background and waited for what came next. Cooper gathered his pages. He paused before he stood. Mr. Hayes, 20 years in this work. I've located people who had very clear reasons for not being located. When I find them, I usually come to understand quickly whether they chose not to be found or whether circumstances found them first. Those are different situations. They require different things. A beat. I don't know yet which this is. He stood. He picked up his folder and he left. No further elaboration. He had said the thing he intended to say, placed it in the room, and then removed himself. The thing he said remained. I sat with what he had not finished. Daniel and I did not talk for several minutes. I put my hand on the laptop, not on the keyboard, on the corner of the case, at the hinge, on the scratch. I left it there. Longer than this morning, longer than every other time I had found my hand there without choosing to put it there. I was not thinking about the laptop. My hand stayed where it was. Daniel broke the silence. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "That's the first time in 9 years I've heard you say that." I did not disagree. For 9 years I've always had an answer, not always the right one, not always, looking back, even a good one, but an answer, something I was moving toward. I do not sit in the space between a problem and a response. I find the response and I move towards it. That has been the mechanism. It has worked. It has served me for a long time. Tonight I did not have a response. Tonight I sat in the gap between the problem and the answer, and I did not reach for the answer, and the reaching did not come on its own.
Daniel knew better than to call this progress. He also knew better than to call it anything else. He sat across from me with the folder on the table and the laptop on the table and the half-empty room around us, and he let me have the silence I was sitting in. That was the right call. After a while, I said, "Where is Daniel's car?" "Downstairs," he said, "always downstairs." I did not respond to that. I sat with it a while longer. The city was dark outside the window. The answer was not coming. I stopped waiting for it. I looked at the address on the page. The pages were still on the table. The address in Philadelphia, Cooper's notes, the name of the hospital at the top of the second page. I have built what I have built by knowing what I want and walking directly toward it. No hesitation, no revisiting, no pausing at the door to reconsider the logic. That has been the first rule since I was old enough to have rules. Know the target, move. Everything else is delay. People mistake this for ruthlessness. It is not ruthlessness. It is clarity. You can love something and still walk toward it without hesitation. You can grieve something and still function. The two things are not in opposition. Hesitation is not depth. It is just time you spend standing still when you could be moving. That rule has never failed me. I looked at the address. The city was quiet outside the building. It had settled into its nighttime sounds. Daniel had gone into the other room. I was alone with the table and the pages and the lamp in the corner. I sat with the first rule for a while. That night, I broke it. Not because I had forgiven anything. I have not. 9 years of silence is a choice. Whatever reasons are attached to it, it was still a choice, and I have spent 9 years carrying the weight of it. The forgiveness, if it comes at all, has not come yet. Not because the anger had gone anywhere. It had not. It was where it has always been. It will probably be there for a long time. But Cooper had said a name, and I had read enough to know what that name means.
I had been permitting myself to know it for a week, and I could no longer put it back where I had been keeping it. Brigham and Women's. That was not information anymore. That was a direction. There is a difference between knowing something and being willing to act on it. I have known many things for 9 years, and I have not acted on any of them. Tonight, the distance between knowing and acting collapsed. I did not choose for it to collapse. It simply did. I sat with that for another minute. Then I stood. I closed the laptop. I stood. I crossed the room. I took my coat from the rack. Daniel looked up. "Philadelphia," I said. "Right now? It's 11 o'clock. "I know that," I said. That was all. I put my arm through the sleeve. I opened the door. At the door, I stopped. I did not turn around. "Don't tell Emma I went." I stepped into the hall. I pulled the door shut behind me. The corridor was quiet at this hour. I stood in it for a moment. I did not know exactly why I did not want Emma to know. I only knew I didn't. The not wanting was there, and I left it alone. I walked toward the elevator. A small apartment in Philadelphia, late. The rooms were dim, a single lamp in the corner, low, the kind of place that takes some looking to find, not the kind of address that announces itself. First floor, a quiet street. On the couch, a boy asleep, 8, maybe 9, curled on his side with his feet tucked and one arm thrown across the cushion. He slept the way children sleep when they are not worried about anything, completely, without reservation, giving the whole of himself over to it. In his hand, a small plastic figure, a Naruto figure, one arm sitting at a slight angle at the joint, off by a few degrees, permanent, the kind of repair that holds but never returns the thing to exactly what it was before. Someone had tried. The arm would stay, it just wasn't straight. At the kitchen table, a woman, younger than Clara, dark-haired. She was not reading, she was not on her phone, she was sitting with her coffee cup in both hands, the coffee long since cold, and she was listening. She had the posture of someone who has been waiting for a long time and has become very good at not letting the waiting show. The kind of still that is not peace, the kind that comes from practice. The apartment was quiet except for the boy breathing on the couch. She looked at him once, at the figure in his hand, at the arm that sat slightly off from where it should be. Her hand tightened around the phone, slowly, the way you close a hand around something you do not intend to drop. "My sister," she said, "isn't here." The line stayed open for a moment. Then, dark.